There's no intro music. It's just us. We can just start into it. So, welcome everyone to the Milwaukee Power BI user group. We are here and we're just jumping in really quick, briefly. We're going to do I guess it's our June Power BI user group. It's been a while since we've actually done one on our own. Tommy did one, I think, 2 weeks ago. Last week.
It was last week, yeah.
Oh man, time is flying by. It's going so quick these days.
It's almost like I was just doing this morning
Yeah,
for some
Donald
reason.
Donald says, "Good morning." I'm used to hearing you guys say good morning as opposed to good afternoon. So, this will be just a kind of I think we'll just have an easy Power BI user group session here. We're just going to go over some of the basics of Charticulator. It's something I've been speaking on recently, so we'll just go through a couple of those items. Give you just kind of the run up, how to do it, how to use the program. It's just some of the basics 101s, tips and tricks that I've used when I use the program, just to kind of round out your experience with the Charticulator app. I don't want it to be scary. It's something that I think everyone should have some time. You do need to dedicate some time to like learning it, but I hope by going through these kind of talks and these speaking things, we can share with you our tricks, our techniques that we use, and hopefully that'll make you learn the tool a little bit faster. So that's the goal tonight. Let me transition into some slides here. Let's go over to this one. Or not. How about this one? There we go. Now we got slide decks. There we go. All right. The slide deck for tonight is going to be super simple. We want to just cover, here's our agenda for tonight. We'd like to cover some just hot topics. We'll just talk about some things that we think are interesting and relevant. We'll do the presentation around Charticulator. And in typical Power BI Milwaukee user group fashion, we will jump right into a happy hour. Feel free to grab your favorite beverage. We'll leave the live stream and then we'll have everyone join through a link in the YouTube chat window. And then you can join us and we'll just sit down and chit chat for like 45 minutes or so until Seth and Michael have had enough Power BI talk for the day. And we'll pass out and we'll call it a night. So that's kind of basically the agenda for today. And with that, let's do our hot topics. So let me transition back here to the both of us. So topics for today will be 2 new features that kind of have recently come out. Both of them actually I think we're really excited about. We talked a little bit about this morning for those of you who followed us on the podcast. There's a paginated report visual and a scanner API. So Seth, you want to give us some updates on what's the paginated report visual like and what are we expecting to see for that visual?
Yeah, I'm excited about this one, especially to kick the tires. I think I'll do it tonight. So if you're familiar with the paginated reports in Power BI, we have the Power BI report server where it's on premises, and then we can deploy those reports into Power BI workspaces. Earlier this year, it was fantastic because they've allowed us to kind of merge, or they changed licensing a little bit, so we can access those a lot easier with the PPU SKUs. And it brings the paginated experience to Power BI. So in the June release, which just came out 2 days ago, one day ago,
June 25th.
This week's a blur.
Yeah,
it's a blur already for me.
June 25th was when they had the blog announcement release. So that was like Friday, late Friday.
Yeah, the now released is the paginated visual, right? So we can in our Power BI desktop experience have a paginated visual that gives us a different matrix or table view. And reading the blog, essentially there's 2 ways we can interact with that paginated visual. One is queue up a bunch of filters in our Power BI report and then apply them, or have it kind of in this auto refresh type experience. They allude to the fact that it might not be as snappy as some of the other visuals,
which makes sense.
But that's the part I'm gonna test out and see how absurd you can get with data sizes, because one of the other cool things about it is it doesn't have the limitation of 150,000 rows that you can export.
Correct.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but for a lot of the interactions that some report users use, they always want to export. So having just another option within the flow of a Power BI desktop report and that interface, I'm really excited about. And I think we'll be talking about it more in the podcast for sure as I start to play around with it. So I think very cool that they've integrated that far.
I think they've met a really unmet need here. I think there's 2 features or maybe 3 features here that I really like about this. Uh, when you build a report, you're able to build parameters in the report. And so if you think about paginated reports, typically a paginated report is parameter driven. You would inject a bunch of parameters and then it renders back to the original data source the view of that data page, whatever that may be. This to me feels a lot like what a table visual should be doing in general. And so I feel like this is a good gap filler until they can maybe revamp or update the table visual because I like the idea of paging through my data. I
Yeah.
really don't feel like having one massive page or one massive table in a Power BI report visual is really adding a lot of value at the end of the day. I think that's a big win there when you can have paging turned on. Um,
It's a really good good point, right? Because maybe this changes just the way that interaction works,
yeah.
right? Like I have my aggregate data sets, I have my selections, and then I want my detail. And when I look at my detail, I want to export it.
Yep. Potentially.
So it's okay that I wait for a little bit or something.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see.
My initial thought here is there's probably like a single report page with maybe some connection to some filters that you'll have 2 or 3 like an overview page, maybe you'll have like some detail pages around like with visuals on them, and then maybe
Yeah.
you somehow hot link your way into a third page where you have the table, and that might be then at that point in time just the paginated report, and then you can look at all of the data there based on whatever filter criteria you apply at the page level. So I'm interested. I need to play with it more. I haven't had a chance to really get into it very much. I think this is a good gap filler. It opens up a lot more possibilities. I will caution you though.
Yeah.
We do know that this is in fact a premium level feature. So if you're going to use, so it's paginated reports, but that requires a minimum of an A1 SKU if you're embedding for your customers, and it needs to be on premium or a premium per user
These are the PPU SKU.
PPU
Yeah.
SKU in order to consume the embedded the Power BI paginated reports inside the visual.
Yep.
So just be mindful of that. I think it's a good feature. The other feature we were going to talk about today was really around the new API that is being delivered, and this has been I feel like it's been a long-term gap that we need filled from an IT administration standpoint for people who've been in the Power BI space for a while. Reuse and build our own documentation. We just had to do it on our own. And this is a really good help API to help us build out better documentation about what our models are doing and what our reports are doing. So I think this is a really great, the technical name of it is, what is it called? It's admin API? No, what's it called?
I just wrote this down too. Garbage.
Oh, scanner API.
Scanner API. Yeah.
It's the scanner API. So I've been listening to some other MVPs chat about it. They're very excited about this. And this adds in potentially a lot more. I can see where this is going. I really feel like this was like a play for, hey, we have Purview. It is able to get a lot of information about your data sets, your SQL, your
Yeah.
big data tables, your Delta tables. You can read all that information, but it really had no visibility into what was happening inside a data model or in the measures that you're creating on. And I don't know, this is one thing I need to check with it is, can you use this thing on the thin reports? Because that's another, I think, a general tooling weakness area that we don't have a lot of visibility to. Can I look at it at a data
Yeah.
model level, and can I go after a thin report with it? Because that's something I need to test.
I'm excited about this one too, like more so probably than paginated because documentation. Everybody loves documentation.
I don't love it. I just want to automate it. I just want automated
yeah,
documentation.
that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
I'm being sarcastic, Mike. You should know this by now.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Yeah, I mean, this could save so much time. But to your point, it's got to work on thin reports. Basically for those who
It's a good
are
point.
vernacular around a thin report, right? Like
Yes.
one model that serves many Power BI reports. When you
Yep.
plug them all in, we don't have some of the same capabilities to interrogate the model or figure things out on the back end. So hopefully this does do that.
And that's another one I'd say the thin report concept I think is something that Microsoft is pushing. Build one large
Mhm.
data model and then
Yeah.
have many reports hanging off of it. But right now that concept it's strong, but there's not a lot of support to help you get into those thin reports and figure out what is in the thin report and what are the measures that are captured there. How do I document those? and where are they used, right? So I have this,
Yeah.
well-designed model with many different areas for reporting, but I can't see all the details. What are other people building on top of my models? I think there's going to be some really good insights coming with that. So I like where they're going
Yeah.
with it. I think this is
Yep.
definitely being a feature driven by the enterprise. And with that,
Totally agree.
I think, is there any other announcements that you saw or read? Did you actually get a chance to read through the release on, I guess it was Friday, the blog release?
I'm a Chris Finland fan, so I was just so thrilled when I saw paginated that I don't think I made it past anything further than that.
I think I'm browsing through the website right now.
But I got questions, Mike. I got questions.
Galore.
So I'm interested. I'm interested in the presentation you're doing tonight, man, because Charticulator, it's the thing.
It is cool.
So many questions around it. Like, want to do so much more with it.
Let me point out one more item here that I found on the release that was very interesting that they pointed out. For those of you who follow just in general more of the blogs from Power BI, a company that I've been very impressed with recently has been Zebra BI. They've been doing a really good job just building out additional custom visuals. And they just released on this most recent blog post, they released a really interesting video around Zebra BI's version 5.0 on their table visual. And again, Seth and I have been really harping on the table visual here recently. We've been trying to heavily customize and stylize that for what for our needs inside like an external share to clients. Right? So the client has requests, they want a table a certain way. We just lack the ability of making our tables look cool. Most of Power BI is amazing and super flashy, and we can like really just turn up the dial on the amazingness of like these reports. One of them we have failed to be able to do very well in the standard visuals is tables. And that's just one that's been, we feel recently has been a very, particularly the matrix, just is very much hard to work with, and we don't feel like it's there all the way. So I'm interested to see where some of these external companies are going to start enhancing these table visuals to a level that would, is this really something we can use? Would this be something that our clients would like as we build reports for them as an external facing application? So I'm really curious to see where this goes. I need to probably try some more times, but that's another one I would point out for our user group is check out some of the Zebra BI visuals. I believe they have free trials on them. The downside of these visuals are they are paid. So some of these, in some cases, these are full companies developing visuals for you in Power BI, and they come with a subscription level. So be mindful of that if you're going to be building reports with these things. You can get a free trial, but if you're going to productionalize something, they usually want to have some form of support so that way they can continue to fund the development or the improvements of that visual for you.
And if I'm going to make a recommendation based on a lot of the ones I've seen out there, you need to bring the levels of customization that some of the other Power BI visuals have by default, right? Like,
agreed.
If you want to be a widely used visual, you need to bring a little bit more in terms of allowing someone to modify what that visual looks like, and
agreed.
A little bit of the finer detailed type aspects that for all intents and purposes, we're kind of given some gentle nudging towards Microsoft to resolve.
Awesome. All right, and with that, I'll just zoom back over here to the slide deck, hopefully.
So you're going to create a table in Charticulator, right?
Yeah, I wish that was that easy.
No?
Wish it were that easy. All right, so today's topic will be just talking about Charticulator. So I've already done a presentation for, I believe it was the Denmark user group on this exact presentation. So I'm a big, one slide and demo kind of person. So there's I guess a fad coming around now. It's a one slide presentation, and this will be as close to a one slide presentation as you can get. So I'm going to jump out of the PowerPoint presentation here, and I'm just going to do a quick overview. So I want to introduce the concept of Charticulator to individuals who are not aware of it. So first things first, let's just go to where can you find this, and I will jump into hopefully a browser window here, and we will go over to charticulator.com. And let's just jump on that. Charticulator. Now, this is the actual application. So this is Microsoft's team. I didn't write this code. It was way too much code for me to write. This is the Microsoft team, their research team. So they built this program around some white papers they did. And if you think about what this program is doing, Charticulator is very, very close to what I see Tableau doing. You're building data on top of a single visual. So here's what they kind of show you. They show you can build all kinds of different charts. You have like this navigation panel on the left-hand side where you can add data elements. So that's almost like the same thing in Power BI where we have a field well on the left this time, where you grab and drag data points to various uh, visual elements on the page. So this is them building a chord chart of shipping information around the US. So this is kind of how they build it. They have a chart like this where you can build crazy amounts of really cool ideas. You can have small multiples in here. You can build chord charts. You can link data between different data points. This is like a railroad track, a visual that they have. Really interesting visuals. They've really, really well thought this out. The initial design of this program was all in this web app, and I really jumped onto this right away. I thought this was huge. I felt like this was a huge gap filler for anything that Power BI needed. So I started right away building my own version of this. So I took the code that's off of GitHub and made charts.powerbi.tips. And so with that, I actually started using their program and developing just my own kind of language on top of it. You're really experimenting with it and figuring out what we could build with this. So up until this point, it's really been like an external application, a website that you just kind of work with, and you don't really get to have the full ability to interact with Power BI. What the new development is now on AppSource, you're now able to pull in this really rich application directly into Power BI Desktop. So here we are in Power BI Desktop. This is my sample file that I work on to build out my Charticulator series. If you have not seen it, there is a full series on YouTube, and I'll just quickly touch base on that one. So actually, Seth, if you don't mind, would you mind going to grab the YouTube Power BI Tips playlist for I believe it's the Charticulator Season 1 playlist? Because that's I've done about 10 videos so far. I've done 9 myself and 1 with Daniel Marsh. And we're going to be doing our 11th video on Thursday this week, where Daniel will be demoing how to make a comet chart. So I've gotten through like the tutorial portions of it, and now we're getting into more of the fancy, here's how we build extra visuals and things inside the application. Okay, so we're in Power BI Desktop. Let's just start with how do we get Charticulator into this as a custom visual. So what you would do is you would click on the ellipsis. You'll say get more visuals on the right-hand side here. Let me just make sure I have zoom it up because I got to make sure that there you go. So you click the ellipsis, and then once you click the ellipsis, you'll click on the get more visuals option in the menu. This will take you to AppSource, and this is where Microsoft keeps all of their published versions of visuals that you can go download and pull directly into your Power BI desktop files. So I'm going to search here for Charticulator, and then there it is. So this is the Charticulator app. I'll just hit add. And what it will do is it will say, hey, well, in this case, I already have the visual. I'll just say update it. Hopefully this doesn't break all my demo pieces. We've been able to update the Charticulator visual. And so now the bits or the code that allows us to be able to build Charticulator is now inside our Power BI desktop. So in order to bring out the visual, I just click on the icon over here in the visualizations pane. By clicking on the icon, I will then be able to drop that visual right onto the page. And then here is the basic loader for Charticulator. Now, you'll notice right away, there's a lot of how to get started. Do you want to know more? Here's a tutorial. So I'm going to skip all that stuff for you. I'm going to try and get you right to the good stuff right away. And I'll give you my technique on how I build these visuals in Charticulator. So that's how to install it into desktop. Let's just jump into how do I build things? What do we build, for my items? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to this page called bar chart. So when I build Charticulator visuals, I usually start with a table. So I'll start with the financials table here that I have in my data set, and I'll just pick something and bring it to the list here. So I'm going to bring country onto the page. And because this is a country and Power BI recognizes this as a geographical piece of data, I'll actually change it from a map into just a table. So what I'm really looking for here is I'm looking for the dimension. the dimension of this is my country, and then I want to add some calculation to it. And we can use measures or implicit columns. So I'm going to use this sales column and make an implied measure here of total dollars in sales. And then what you can do here is you can actually click on the down arrow and you can change the aggregation. So you can say average, the average sale dollars here, or something else. I want some numbers that have a little bit of variance. Have 140 records for each sale count. Minimum looks okay. We've got some variance in data. So what I have the minimum of sales and I have my country column. So this is the data. This is very important because whatever you render on this table, this is exactly what Charticulator will see. If I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items in this, if I have 5 items here, these same 5 items would be the same 5 items I show in Charticulator. For example, if I need more items to appear, if I need 2 items for Canada and 2 items for France, or whatever that would be. Again, my data is at a much finer grain in my data model. I would add other columns in here that would break out this data or blow it up so there's more records of data. So if I grabbed another column here called segment and added this in, you'll see now that I have Canada repeated, looks like 5 times. So now I have Canada and I have all these different bar segments that are related to Canada. So if I want to see this row by row level data, I would need to add additional columns to this. Sometimes people get themselves a little tripped up where they have 10 data points and they want all 10 data points to appear on the chart. And when that happens, you need to add an index column or some kind of dimensional property in your data model that shows all the records. So this table has to have, line by line, the full level of records that you need to push to Charticulator to work. So for kicks and giggles right now, I'm going to take off the segment item. I just wanted to, build out this table here. So I'll just use just a two item table here. And I'm going to start by building a simple bar chart. So let's build one in Power BI Desktop first. So I'm going to copy this data table. So Control C, Control V. And now that I have a new table, I will click the bar chart. Let's go column chart or bar chart like this. And there's my bar chart. And then if I want to color each country by the label on the y-axis, I just grab the country label and add it to my legend. And there we go. So now I've been able to format, this is my sample bar chart. You don't get a lot of extra options. There are some things that you can do in Power BI Desktop. If you want to turn on the data labels, you can turn those on. But I can't really move the words anywhere. So in this case, it's kind of wasteful to have these words all the way off on the left-hand side here because I'm wasting a lot of white space. Maybe those words need to be on top of the data bar. We don't have those options inside Power BI's standard visuals. So let's just build a simple bar chart like this one is, but we're going to do it inside Charticulator, and then we're going to enhance some of the data here so that's slightly different. So let's put this bar chart up here towards the corner. And now I'm going to add the Charticulator visual into the page. Actually, you know what? I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. I will go back to my report. I'm going to delete this visual. I like doing this a different way. I like starting with a data table. So I'll copy this, Control C, Control V, and I'll actually copy my data table like this, and then I'll change it from a table to a Charticulator visual. I'm lazy. I like doing that, and then I just move all my columns up here. So what I've done is I now have the Charticulator visual open, and I've added 2 data columns only to the data section at the top here. Now that I have those 2 columns added, we can go click the ellipsis. So to start editing or building the Charticulator option, you have to click this More Options up here. And when you click that, it lets you edit the visual. And now it goes full screen. So now I get this visual that's really large. And because I've already added my 2 columns that I need here to the visual, I can minimize the visualizations and the fields well. Those are not needed anymore. And then now what I'll do in this chart area, I'll say, let's create a chart. So when I click on create a chart, the full Charticulator, application now opens up, and I'll even minimize the top bar here as well so I get the most amount of landscape space. So let's just go through this. This is Charticulator. Let's just walk through the UI here, and I'll just kind of explain what's happening. In this layers area, you have the chart area. That is this gray box here. If I hover over here, that blue square is the entire area of the chart. The plot segment, I click here. This is a plot segment that's been pre-applied for you, and it tells you this is a two-dimensional plot segment. You only have two type of plot segments you can do. Two-dimensional, so X and Y, or you have a one-dimensional, so it's just like a straight line plot segments. You have these things called a glyph. So a glyph is a collection of squares, shapes, text, whatever you want to call it, and the glyph goes in this little glyph box up here towards the top. So this is my glyph area up here. Walking across the top menu here, we start off with the links. Linking is an option that when you have two data tables or two visuals, two plot segments essentially, if I have two plot segments on the page, I can link data between them based on some sort of dimension. We'll do that later in the demo. I have this other icon here called the legend. So this is just the legend icon. So if you have data or you have data on the page and you want to add the legend, you can click that button and it will add a separate legend to the data table somewhere. Then there's this concept called guides. So if I click the down arrow here, and I actually just made that guide, so I'm going to get rid of him. I don't want this guide on the page. If I click the down arrow here, you have a horizontal guide, a Y, a vertical guide, and then you have these things called guide in the X direction and guides in the Y direction, and you also have a guide for a polar guide, so a circular polar. These lines, these dotted lines, are what these things are called guides. So by default, the Charticulator app gives you this page line here, one at the very middle of the page, and one at the very middle of the page in the horizontal direction. These lines do not change. You can't make them disappear. They can't be erased. But these lines define all the things relative to your visual. So these guides are very important. If I want to adjust the gap, let's call this the gap here, that little area between the edge of the page or the edge of the visual and the dotted line, I can go down to the chart area. So clicking on the chart, I can go down to the margins and I can adjust these. So instead of being 50 pixels, I'll just do 10. And when I do that, you'll notice that each of my lines or the guides on the edge of the page have now shrunk. And now they're only 10 pixels away from the edge of that visual. So it's like my little margin that we have there. Because I'm building this in desktop, I typically don't like any margins. Or if I do use them, I'll use them sparingly. Usually it will depend on my chart type and how I'm building the data table to adjust things. So sometimes I'll have the left margin be like 100 because I actually have text over here on the left-hand side that I want to use. But all the other margins can be almost 0 because there's no data falling off the edges of the page. Okay. Another thing about these guides, if I want to grab these guides, if I grab the X guide, when I do this, I'm actually looking at these little orange dotted lines. So if I grab my cursor here and put it towards the middle, anytime I highlight something, when my cursor is near a line or a guide, it's giving me this orange highlighting. So it's indicating to me that I can snap my data point to that guide area. And this is also very important for spacing things. So if I grab my guide here and I've just clicked on the middle section here and dragged my guide down to the bottom section. And did I do it right? I don't think I did. Let me get rid of my guide coordinator. Let me erase that again. Let's go guides. I was looking for the horizontal one, guide on the Y direction. And I'll grab here and drop right down there. Okay, now I've got it. So you'll see now that my line, this guide line is now adding more guides for me to adjust my visual with. So these are the areas that I can use to link other data points or other styled properties of this chart together. This is nice because when I shrink this or I adjust it, any way I adjust this visual, those guides will automatically resize with the size of the visual. So if I make my visual very tall or wide, the guides will always be linked to those areas on the chart. So no matter what I do, they are building some sort of proportions around the page so that my visual will look the same or be appropriately designed that way. So again, the guides are very important. You don't get to see them. They're not visible on the report when you use them in the report, but they're very helpful for you to, like, if you need to space something away from the edge of something, or if you need a grid, you can add other things here. This also has a lot of options. So if I click on the guide coordinator, you can see I have a count of 4 segments. If I keep increasing this, you just get more guides. So those are more areas where I can then snap my data points to. So I don't need the guide coordinator. I'm going to erase them. the guides that I use the most, I don't really use the wide or the X guide. I almost exclusively use the guide in the X direction and the Y direction. Those are probably the ones I use the most. Now let's move on to this thing called plot segments. So I said by default, we have this plot segment on the page. It's called the plot segment. If I'm going to erase this, I'm going to basically start from scratch. If I click on the plot segment item on the menu here, I can snap a plot segment into this upper left-hand corner. So this is a single graph that I can build right here. The cool part about this is I can build another graph on the page somewhere else. So just for kicks and giggles here, I'm going to go to this plot segment, and can I adjust the... I'm trying to figure if I can adjust the color on it. For now, what I'll do is I'll just add a little mark on it here real quick so we can see that. So here's some data points on this chart. So this chart has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 glyphs on it, because each of these glyphs are representing one data point from my original data set. That's why I start with a table, because I had 5 data points, one for each country, and some data point that went along with it. So that's what this is doing. If I make another plot segment, so I'm going to click on here and click another plot segment, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, I can make another plot segment, but you'll notice in this case, the glyphs are exactly the same. So I'm using the same glyph on both plot segments. It's this little bar-looking thing. That's not necessarily what you want all the time. Instead, what you may want is, if you want to make an entirely different visual or chart type on the page, if you click this little plus sign here, make a new glyph first, like this, you'll now have an empty glyph. To edit this glyph, you need to create another plot segment. So with this glyph highlighted, I can now grab another plot segment, and I can drag another graphical area on the page, and now I have a brand new glyph linking to a brand new plot segment. Now the data also links together, so now this time I can go grab a little circle, and I can just drop him in the middle here, and now I have 5 circles, one for each data point. So it's still the same data, it's now just a different 2-dimensional plot segment, and now I can bind my data fields into this data section as well. So this concept of a plot area and a glyph go hand in hand. Each plot segment has one glyph, and so you can have many plot segments with the same glyph, but you can also have a one-to-one relationship where you have one plot segment, one glyph. So other things that you can do there as well. So I'm going to erase some of this because we don't need this right now. And we're going to build our bar chart. So we also have this...
Mike, real quick.
Yep.
What comes first, the glyph or the plot segment?
That's a great question.
Is it the glyph?
Yeah, it's actually the glyph. So the glyph is really the starting point of what you're doing here. The glyph is your first area. So I don't even know if I can erase this other one. So I typically would start with a glyph, and then I would give it a plot segment, and then I would drag out the plot segment. It's a little deceiving because the program automatically by default gives you a glyph and gives you a plot segment. So you think naturally you would start with the plot segment, put it on there, and then go to the glyph. But it's actually backward. You want to start by adding the glyph first, and then adding a new plot segment when you need to.
So a glyph, it corresponds to like a multiple different views that I want to create on the same visual kind of thing.
Yeah. So you can think of a glyph as like, if I drop the glyph is really, let me pop this out here. So this is where I would like Microsoft Desktop team to take note here. Look at this, Microsoft Desktop team. If I click this pin,
unpin,
I can unpin a window. How amazing is that? All right, so you can think of this glyph as everything. Remember how we talked about the plot segment having those guides? The glyph has the same set of guides. The glyph is essentially a rectangle, is basically what it is. This rectangular area defines everything in here, defines the glyph. For every dimension data point we have, so we had 5 earlier from our different countries. For every data point we have, we get one glyph. So when I add this mark, and so I can, in this area for the glyph area, I can add a circle, a triangle. I can add, a shape. Like these are like squares, circles, triangles, star. I can actually add lines or text. So these are all these different marks on the glyph allow me to put things, or basically a stylized object on the glyph area. And so you can extend over the edges of the glyph, but really you can think of the glyph as the bounds around that single data point. country, United States. What do I want to do with that? So what I'll do here to make our bar chart is I'm going to add this mark glyph, and I'm going to drag from the top corner to the bottom corner. So I've defined this is my glyph. My glyph is something super simple. It's literally a square. That's all I'm doing. And so if I pin this back in, you'll see that all the heights of these bars are equal heights because I have not taken any data to tell the bar how high to be. So now what I can do is, this is a glyph, and I'll unpin this again. Now that I've built some objects on my glyph, I now go in here and add my minimum of sales, and this is now my data point, and I say I want to define what is the height of this glyph. So when I add this here, it's going to adjust this for each country. What is the minimum of sales from my data model? And now if I go back and pin this back in, you can now see I have different bars, and we don't see it yet, but each one of these represents one of the countries, and the height of the bar is now the total of whatever that data point was, or the minimum of sales. So that's the single value that's being represented here. So again, this is where we get into, like, there's a lot of things in the weeds here where we can go to colors and other things here as well. So what we can also do in glyphs is where Power BI Desktop requires you to use only the styles or properties that are inside the visual, Charticulator allows you to build what any data point, right? So I have one object in my glyph, a square, but what if I want to add a label? So I can click the label object, and then I can just define a location for my label. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to move the text up a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate it so that it's 90 degrees out. Move it up a little bit more. And so now I've defined some text field. But again, I don't want it to just to say text. I want to bind this to some data. So now I can grab the country column and drop it into and basically make this text the country. So now this makes more sense. So I pin this back out. Now we have these different countries, and for each of the countries, I now represent the height of their bar by a certain data point. So similarly, what we can do with like what desktop is doing, we can actually add colors here. So there's a whole bunch of other really rich properties. So when I click on the shape has properties. It has a width. It has a height. It has the shape type. It can be rectangle, triangle, or ellipse. You can flip its direction around. You can adjust the color or the stroke or the opacity. So these are all properties of the shape of a square that you could adjust to then enhance the visual here. So if I grab country and drop it here on the fill, now I'm able to take those different countries and make them filled by various labels here. So we can get all kinds of fancy with this if we want. Our text now looks like it's very hard to read, and it probably needs to be larger. So let's make our text white, and we can actually make the size of our text much bigger. Let's go with 25. And so now I have these individual data bars now with horizontal labels. And then I think we can also adjust, we can stack this chart in different directions. So right now we're stacking across the X direction. We can actually change this to be stacking in the Y direction. And that has now modified the height of the bars. So you can actually see here very oddly, when I change that direction, because I added the width of the bar to be designed by my data points, it's now making those widths a very odd number. So I go back to my glyph, and because I reoriented my data points, I'm going to click on the shape here, and where it says the height of the bar is defined by this calculation, I'm going to now erase it. So now all the bars are equal height, and this time I'm going to grab the minimum of sales and make it my width. So now the bars are now adjusting their width correctly to match what is on the rest of the visual. And we can also see here my data label is now totally out of whack. It's in the wrong location. So I'm going to rotate him 90 degrees. And so now he's 90 degrees in the middle. But if I want him on the left-hand side, I can grab him and drag him to the left-hand side and then move my label over. So now I have moved my label to have that same orientation. So even though I rotated the direction of the glyph, I basically took the glyph from a very tall glyph and stretched out to be a very wide glyph. And that's why I had to move my data points around. So that's basically how we can build a bar chart here. And the reason I like this is now I'm not wasting any white space on the left-hand side here. I can go back to my plot segment. And then on my chart area, I can adjust this to not be left 100. I can do left 10. And if we want to add any other data points, right, we can get creative with that as well. So if I go back to my glyph. We're going to add another mark on here. So we'll go marks of another data label. And I'm just going to add another mark here on, let's go to the bottom right-hand corner. And then I'm going to shift this up into the space here. And this time I'm going to add the actual minimum of sales. And we will make it white again so we can also see it as well. And you'll notice here that it's formatted in a kind of a funny way. So we have this $sign. So the language of this, let's see if I can make this any wider. Does it let me? I don't think it does. The language of this is actually d3.js. There's a language that they're using here for formatting. And what you can do is if you want to format things, I believe I just need to write, I could do 0.0f, which would then get rid of the first part. And I believe there's another syntax. I always forget this. Let's just comma, if I drop a comma in there, there it goes. So I add a comma to this. So comma dot 0 10f now adds a comma separated number in there. And if I wanted to add other text in front of this, I could go to the front of this and say, okay, so it's doing an average of this value. The $sign and the squiggly bar here means it's adding some sort of designation there. If I go in front of this and put a $sign, hopefully it'll add a $sign. So now I can actually start formatting my text with $sign, comma, 0 decimal places, and now I've got a nice $sign symbol there. And so we can also go in here, increase that a little bit in size, and then I can call it done. So I'm going to pin this back in, and you'll now note I have this, label on top of the bar. I have a number that is now labeling the actual width of that bar for me, and this is custom, right? So that we can't do this in desktop. There's no way for me to add other styled elements here.
What was that language again?
I think it's d3.js. And there's a syntax. You actually have to go onto the website. I believe it's actually on their website. So if I go to Charticulator, I'll just pull it up here real quick. And you think you go into the About section. No, Getting Started. And then we go into text formatting. And then halfway down here, they start talking about, hey, we're doing text formatting. It follows, starts talking about other things here where you can do other things. Where did they? Okay, right here. The Charticulator allows formatting of the visuals that are following the D3 syntax. So D3 is a very open standard for JavaScript and building related visuals, visual graphical language, essentially. So this is their formatter, and these are the different formatting things you can do. So all these, here's are their types, right? You can do an exponential notation, fixed notation. G means decimal or significant additions, and they give you examples here, like what do these things format as when you use these different lettering and other things as well. So a really rich language. They're using another language to help you define what these things can do, but it's kind of nice because this is already built and you can just kind of use it and consume it.
Kind of the 400 level question here is, would you know offhand whether or not that would open up the capabilities to use other fonts other than what's default in here?
That's a great question. I don't believe there's any other fonting available. That would be a function. I think the visual itself has to handle the fonts for you. I do believe there is, so on all the different chart areas, you do get a list of what font is being used on here, I believe.
Yep.
So I can look down here. It says Arial. So this is your list of fonts that you can use. And this is actually functions of the Charticulator app. One thing you'll note here, Segoy UI is not listed.
Yeah, the fonts are different actually than
so,
a lot of the defaults. Yeah.
So if you add Segoy UI here, believe it or not, it still works. So Segoy UI somehow is recognized by Charticulator and this application. So you can actually keep the font type, whatever that font type is. Yeah, right? Makes your head turn, right? So yeah, so you can actually change the fonts. So this one's Arial, and I don't really like Arial. So Segoy UI, and I know that's one that we have, and it automatically formats that. So now this is now the same formatting that you would find in desktop, because desktop uses Segoy UI basically for everything. But you can change any label on anything, whatever font type you want, you can do it in here. So there's our bar chart. We've made a new version. I'm going to save this bar chart here. So it saves the designation of how I built this. And I'm going to go back to the report up here in the right-hand corner, and then there's my chart. The downside of Charticulator here is it has a ratio that matches whatever the ratio is in your visual. So if I make my visual really wide, it does not scale my visual with the width of this visual here. So I have to make it larger like this. So the ratio, the aspect ratio is the same. So a trick that I use when I build these is figure out what my aspect ratio is. I'll go build the chart. Oh, shoot, it doesn't look right. So let's figure out what this aspect ratio of this chart looks like, and then go into the visualizations, paint roller, general. Okay, the position is we're 738 by 3. Let's just make it nice and easy. Let's do 700 by 300. So 700 by 300. That's the ratio of my visual. I'll go back in here and hit edit, and then I'll kind of, okay, I know that's the ratio I'm looking for. So my width will be 700 and my height will be 300. Now the ratio is the same as what my other visual would be doing. Click save, back to report, and now it's nice and maximized. It matches
Nice.
the aspect ratio. So that's one trick I use because you can't really adjust that too far. And there we go. That's our first visual. Just checking here. Okay, just looking for questions. No questions or comments at this time. Let's move on to another chart type. So this is another chart type that I've seen some people ask about it on the internet. The idea of a barbell chart. So for those of you who don't know, let's see if I can pull up a Wikipedia page here real quick and just give you a quick barbell chart, what this is going to look like. So basically it's one of these kind of charts. So you have a dimensional property right here. So we'll zoom into this. And of course, they're building this in, it looks like a Tableau. So this is a Tableau feature we're going to give you now in Power BI. So the idea here is you have a minimum data point, a maximum data point, and for some sort of category. So we have a category of appliances. There's a minimum value and a maximum value, and then you draw a line between these two data points. So we're going to incorporate some new design aspect here to help us understand how to build this barbell chart. And this gives you a bit more information about what your data is doing. So you can see like distribution of numbers, or what's the minimum and then what's the maximum number. So we can start being a bit more creative with what we're doing in our data charts. Okay, so let's get out of there, minimize that. And let's just, again, like we started before, let's just start with some data. So what I'll do is I have a data set here for barbell charts. I'm going to grab my category, very simplistic here. And then I'll have my sales numbers here. So these are my sales numbers by category. Super simple. And it looks to me as though these sales numbers are actually in a text format. So let me just edit this query real quick. Let me make sure they're not text. They are. Let's just change it to whole number. Close and apply. There we go. They're on the right-hand side, which now means this is a number. Okay. So by default, I'm showing all the values. So the hats values have 45 to 30. And again, I talked earlier about only the data points I can show are actually going to be in the chart. So in this case, what I really want is I want hats, and I want the minimum of sales, and I want the maximum of sales as two separate columns. So I'm actually going to modify this. So I know what data I want. I want to show the category and then the min and max values. So in order to do that, I want to be able to show that all on the same chart. So first thing I'll do is here on the sales, I'll actually change this to the minimum. So now I have a column called the minimum of sales. So that's the minimum value of my 4 values that I had. And then I'm going to grab sales again and make another implicit measure to say maximum of sales. This is not Michael's tutorial on how to make good measures and good data models. I would not recommend you using implicit measures for all your calculations and visuals, but for sake of argument here, I do want to point out we're making implied measures here for those of you who are following along at home. All right, so now we have our minimum and maximum value. This defines the ends of the barbell. And now we can go copy this visual. So Control-C, Control-V. And now we've got this visual out here. And now we can go out and build our Charticulator visual. So now what we'll do is we'll jump into here. We'll click on the Charticulator option. We now have Charticulator open. Click on the ellipsis. Click on Edit. We'll click Create Chart. We're back in the application now. And why don't I have my fields? Let me go back to report here. Oh, yeah. I know why I did that wrong. So I jumped in a little too quickly here. I only had data in the category level. I needed my minimum and maximum sales to be added into this upper area. So the reason I didn't have my data labels, well, they were in the wrong section. So I need to move minimum of sales up here, maximum of sales up there. And now when I click the edit button and create chart, we will now see the category, minimum, and maximum of sales. So now I have my data. I'm ready to start building. So same thing we were doing before. We have a two-dimensional plot area. It's already on the page. Now this time we're going to automatically stack on the Y direction. So I'll stack here on the Y. So that means we're going to be building our glyphs horizontally. And if we want to see right away what's going on, we can add the category column over here to the Y axis. So what this is doing, this is showing me these are the options we have. And so there's going to be 4 plot segments. So if I just grab a mark and drag it here to the glyph area, each dimension, hats, pants, shirts, and shoes, has a single bar. So we have that information now. I'm going to remove the bar right now because we don't need it. Now I'm going to highlight what's going on here in the glyph area. So this is something that's very important, and you use this more and more. We need to define where the data points are. So right now I've zoomed in here, so I have this nice glyph area. And we have this other option here on the menu we haven't talked about yet, which is called the data axis. A data axis defines starting points and endpoints. It allows you to take data and take multiple data points and basically put it on a ruler. It's a great icon that you have here, because I click data axis, and where I start my cursor is like the 0 value. It's the smallest value. And where I end my cursor will be the largest value. So on the left-hand side here, I'll start my cursor here. So that's the minimum value. I'll go to the other side, and that's my maximum value. So whatever data I put on here, the smaller values will be on the left because that's where I started, and the larger values will be on the right because that's where I ended. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the minimum of sales, and I'm going to add it to my data axis. So right away, we can see, boom, we have a data point on the axis scale, and this is the average of minimum scales. Now, Charticulator always is doing some sort of aggregations. It's expecting you to aggregate the information or group things by a certain ratio or mathematical function. So even though I'm taking an average here, I'm literally taking an average of a single number. So even though this is saying average, it's actually just the minimum of sales, but it's doing an aggregate function because that's just the way Charticulator has been built. Yeah, I'm not going to explain that anymore. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the maximum of sales, and I will also add that to the data axis. So now I have 2 data points that are defining my minimum and maximum. And you'll notice right here, this minimum and maximum are way here at the far left-hand side. And this other end here, we have 1,001 because it's actually looking at all my data points. So if we went back to the Power BI desktop, you'd notice that I have one area or topic or one barbell that reaches all the way to 1,000. So this line chart is trying to give you the line or the data axis for all data points. It's looking at every piece of data that I have in my data model or my data table that I'm building this visual on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this back in, and I can click on other visuals. And if I click on other data axes, so this is a neat area here. If I click on other glyphs, hopefully, it should change. It's not letting me click on anything here. It would let me change this. It'll let me pick on the different ones. It's not let me. I don't think I have any data points yet on there. So let me just draw something real quick, and we'll make it work for now. It's arbitrarily picking a data point for me, so that's why it's so small on the left-hand side here. So now I'm going to zoom into where this data point is. And so what we need to do is we need to draw a line between the starting point and the ending point. And because this glyph is like a rectangle, I'm going to start here on this middle line. So I'm going to click on the bar line, and you'll see right here as I zoom in, when I put my cursor near this midpoint, it's saying the average minimum is defining my position, and then it's using this other orange line to define the middle area. So I will grab that and draw a line from there to there. So now I have this really tiny line defined in my chart. Now I'm going to make it a bit easier for me to see, so I'm going to change the line width up a little bit. Let's go to line width of like 5. And then I'm going to pin this back in. So now I have different lines. That's why this one is so small. The hats area or dimension has a very small piece of data. So let me go to this bigger one here. And now when now that there's something to click on. So now if I click on the line for pants, the glyph area actually changes and shows me what that glyph area would look like. So this is a little bit easier to understand. This is why it went all the way to 110,000 or 1,100 because this data point is just much larger. So now that we've got our line for the barbell, we now need to add the barbells to themselves on the graph here. So I'm going to grab this little icon or symbol action. I'm going to put an icon here on the one end. I'm going to put another icon on the other end. So now I've got two ends of the barbells as well. And so these are too small, so we can increase the size of these. Let's call it 300. Let's go higher. Let's go 500. Probably good enough. And then on the other end, we can also go to 500 as well. And so now I've got my barbells. And if you want to get fancy with it, you can add a stroke to this. So the stroke has a color, so I can go give it a stroke of like a single dark color, and I can increase the line width of that as well. So we can make that like 3. So I can start enhancing even how those dots look. So it's called blending together there. And this is where you can get really creative with it. We'll add another stroke here. And I don't really like the solid dark colors here. So I'm actually going to adjust this slightly and do like a shade or 2 off of the dark and give this a line stroke of 2. I think that looks better. I'm going to grab this other barbell end here. I don't like that either. So I'm going to go give it a shade off of black. The line, I don't like it being so dark, so I'm actually going to lighten that up to de-emphasize that there. And because we have a min and a maximum, I'm going to make the maximum a nice bright color. So let's make that like a green. And then we're going to make our minimum something different. So I'm going to click on the circle on the other end and then change the fill from that one to like a blue. So now I've got a blue and a green, and I've got a gray line in between. That all rhymed. All right, so now we've got our barbells made on the chart, and so now what we can do is we can continue refining this. So one thing that we don't like right now is it's kind of out of order. It's in alphabetical order by hats, pants, shoes, and shirts, but the line measuring out the dimensions here is kind of in the wrong place. So what you can do is you can click on the data axis, and then you can tell it what position you want it to be. So let's go to the opposite side. So put the numbers on the opposite direction, and it's visible on the first object or the last object. So changing this to the last object, and it puts it all the way down on the shoes. So now I've got the bars all the way across, and now I have a data axis that defines all of them. So I'm going to clean this up a bit more. I don't need these perimeters around the edge here. So I'm going to just adjust the top to be 10, the right to be like 20. And there we go. So we may want to adjust our aspect ratio here to be a bit more like a normal bar chart. So I might just shrink this down a little bit so it feels a little bit more like something that might fit on a page. That might be more what it would realistically look like. Save, back to report, save it again, and there we go. So now we've got our nice little barbell chart right there. And then it's interactive now, so if I click on things, it'll actually give you just the one barbell, or if I click multiple items, it'll then filter that as well. You'll notice here when I click on one item, it automatically auto-scaled the x-axis on this. This is an option that you can change inside the visual itself. So clicking on the visual, you have a option. Oh, okay, it's not here anymore. If I click edit and I go into the data axis here, you'll see in the options down here, you have the ability to auto range the minimum value, auto range the maximum value. You may or may not want one or either of them. So if I turn them off, that data axis will stay the same. It will not adjust. Hitting save and going back to the report. Now when I select different items, it just highlights that bar and where it is on the chart and leaves the 0 and the 1,100 in the same places. Those do not change. So another kind of neat chart there as well. And I had another chart that was we could build real quick, but we're kind of at time. So that's about an hour long. So there is a lot more content around this. I believe Seth dumped in the YouTube playlist, which I'll hit up here real quick. Thank you very much. So if I go over to the YouTube playlist, there's actually 9 videos, actually now 10 videos that are all out there on this playlist. We have 10 episodes. There's going to be 11th one on Thursday. We go through all the basics. What are scaffolds? How does the glyph work? Marks. We try and keep the videos short, so like 20 minutes or so or less. But there's a whole series on this as well if you want to go through in detail all the different videos that we have around Charticulator and how you can use it to help you build stuff. Just one more, I think, really rich tool inside the arsenal. And with that, I'll transition back over to our slide deck. So with that, I think we're at happy hour.
That was good. Great stuff, Mike. I mean, I think the key parts, and I just listen to you talk about Charticulator a lot, but there really just are some just key elements that once you understand them, like it all ties together, right? But unless you watch probably your first couple of videos of here's the components.
Yes.
When you first drop in there, it's quite an experience.
You're lost.
Like I have no idea what to do.
You're so lost, and that's what I feel. I feel like I find a lot of options or when I talk to people about this. That's like their number one complaint. I get into it, I'm so lost. I have no clue where I'm starting. I just can't get going. And so I mean, it took me there was no videos for me. I had to basically jump in the program and just start clicking on things. I got really frustrated right at the beginning because a lot of stuff I would do would just break things, and I don't know why I was breaking stuff. So there's actually, like, as you use it a bit more, you start understanding how it works and what you need to build where, and where do I use a data access, where don't I, what is possible, what's not possible. So one thing you can't do in Charticulator is build tables. So that's one item that you just can't build there, which is kind of disappointing because I really need better tables. But for now, we'll use other tools to make that possible and feasible for us right now. So, and with that, I'm trying to figure out how I get a hand on the meeting notes here, meeting info. That's what I'm looking for. And how do I get a share? Copy, join info, copy that. So what I'll do right now is I'm going to go give everyone a link inside the chat window here. I will sign off on the YouTube. We are officially done with the Power BI YouTube stream for the lesson today. And then we're going to just hang out and talk. If you want to talk about more Charticulator, that's fine. If you want to talk about just other fun things, we're also welcome to do that as well. We'll sit here and we'll probably hang out for another 30, 45 minutes just in the Teams chat. If you guys have additional questions about things that you want to talk about. So let me.
Thanks, Mike.
Let me just see if I can go find the link here so it doesn't screw up. Oh boy, there's like a million links in this thing. Hold on, let me go to my Outlook. The Teams application is very horrible. There we go. Copy that link. Copy hyperlink. There we go. Boom. All right. So it is now in the YouTube channel. So click here to join the happy hour. Singular. All right. And with that, we'll see you guys in a bit. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next month.